the P450 system and drug metabolizing enzyme. You've got real differences as far as how well the skin is developed. You've got substantial differences, even days to the first months of life, as far as renal function is concerned. You've got changes in the GI tract, not only in this drug metabolizing enzymes, but also in, if you've got an oral drug, as to how well it's absorbed. And you've got changes in tissue distribution, okay? And different components of the molecule, its protein binding, its lipophilicity, its how well it's absorbed, what size it is, interacts differently with these different components of the body that are changing rapidly every week or every month. And so think about it as like a traffic system here in Atlanta. Until you get out on the road, you don't know what you're going to get into. Okay? What time do I want to leave for the airport? Well, Dr. Benjamin, it depends. Well, if I leave at 2:30 or 3, can I reliably catch my flight? Well, usually. It's the same. This is an analogous thing with physiology, right? These things act in a complicated ecosystem, and you simply need to go ahead and do the study. All right, and so one of the things we conclusively showed with the exclusivity program and with certainly with our own research is you actually need to do the studies. All right, so let's think about if I'm a pediatrician and I want to have some advocacy around I want drug safety for children, right? This legislation actually will get renewed hopefully in 2012. So there's exclusivity, which gives drug companies 6 months patent protection if they do pivotal studies that they would not otherwise normally do in children. Okay, so by mandate, they have to, this has to be above and beyond whatever their other plans were. Okay? There's PREO, or the Pediatric Research Equity Act, which requires that they do phase 1 and phase 2 studies. And for some of the therapeutics, they actually have to do some phase 3. By phase 3, I mean efficacy. Phase 2 is safety. Phase 1 is just the pediatric. That's up for renewal in 2012. That can all go away. It can all sundown in 2012, but that's there. The Europeans, 2 years ago, they started requiring a pediatric investigational plan. That does not have a sundown, but for new molecules going through Europe, companies have to do legitimate drug testing in the EU. All right. What that does not solve, however, is off-patent therapeutics, because no drug company is going to want to study a generic. They're just not going to, they just don't want to do that. There's no money in it for them to study generics. And so for the off-patent therapeutics, the NIH has been charged by Congress to administer what's known as the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act. This also comes up for renewal in 2012. So the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act, it's called BPCA. What Congress asked for was $25 million a year to go into the study of off-patent therapeutics. For those of you who've done trials for a living, you realize that this is just a few PK trials, few PK and safety trials a year. This is not, you can't do 10 large studies off of $25 million in a year. Unfortunately for the NIH, when they started this in kind of 2004, 2005, their 5-year accomplishments were limited. So they had, by 2010, they'd actually had no labeling changes. They only had one investigator group that actually enrolled on time and on budget. That was our group. We, thumbs up, you'll see, this isn't for young investigators, you're going to see why delivering on time and on budget is important, okay? This was, so we were actually the last group funded of the 12, and we were the first group to complete, okay? The group that we chased down and just beat them fairly had gotten funded 4 years before us. So the NIH said, gee, we're going to start actually, instead of doing these trials one-off and one-off and one-off, we're going to get a single research group to develop a pediatric trials network. Now remember, I told you, deliver on time and on budget, pay attention to your chair, you know, that's sort of good lessons that your mom taught you in kindergarten. Say what you're going to do, then do it. So we were awarded that in October of last year. That's $95 million. That's your tax dollars. Thank you very much for that. And that is a 5-year contract to do a series of trials and off-patent therapeutics. And you know, we believe ultimately it's because we've been delivering on a consistent basis. If you're an investigator, you know, if you're a new investigator, you need a diagram so that your reviewer can kind of get what you're doing. So there's the program management, and that's us at Duke. We answer to the National Institute of Health, NICHD, National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. There's a data safety monitoring board, and there's a group that handles the data goes to a small contract group. We actually do the PKPD modeling, the monitoring, the trial design, all that sort of stuff is under our shop. There's a pharmacometrics group, which that's PKPD, pharmacoepidemiology. That's led by Edmund Caporelli, who's at University of California, San Diego. They report up to us. We have a safety and ethics group when we're dealing with complicated infections or complicated physiology or transplant patients or patients with sickle or whatever, wherever we might need kind of a little extra ethics help. We've got a devices group. We're actually mandated to do a couple of device trials. And then we've got clinical pharmacology, which is responsible for like pharmacogenomics and formulations. And then what was not in the RFA, we went back and forth as a team about whether or not to put this in there. And ultimately, I said, we're going to take the risk. We're going to put it in there. Is that we've got a mentorship core such that most of the trials are actually led by K awardees, whether that's K23 or KL2s. They need to be young investigators. And actually, Edmund, Greg, Mike O'Shea, and I are prohibited from, we put this in the application, we're prohibited from being PIs for any of the trials. Another cool thing that we put into the application, which was that any of the core leaders can be removed for lack of productivity or lack of function or lack of justice. And the other guys weren't too excited about that until they saw that there was actually, I'd written in a plan for how to remove me. So they got a little more comfortable with that. But we have a mentorship core so that each of the junior, so we grow the pipeline. So when we looked at this, and I'm going to be done in 2.5 minutes, maybe 3, so there'll be time for questions. When we looked at it, we're like, we've got until 2012 until this goes up for renewal, the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act. And yes, the contract goes for 5 years, whether or not this act is renewed, but we will have really dropped the ball if we don't deliver in the next 18 to 24 months. And at that time, you needed a pediatric study request from FDA, and I won't go through the details of this right now in the interest of time, but you needed a pediatric study request from FDA. And what I talked NIH into doing was to say, okay, let's go ahead and start doing small trials under an IND in parallel to getting this paperwork done at FDA, so we're not paralyzed and we don't have any deliverables at the end of 24 months. The NIH, with some reluctance, agreed, and I think what kind of pushed them over the edge was that the senior faculty involved in all the projects agreed to take a salary hit, actually, around the amount of support that we were getting, and kind of both sides came to the table and did that. And that's really been a success. Our typical study is going to be 15 to 25